All right, let's do this. Man, I'll tell you what, we've been in the house of God today, haven't we, huh? So, when I was walking up here, one of our elders that was up here whispered into my ear, if you can't preach after that, you need a new job. So that's what we got going here. Man, thanks for being here. Hey, I took a class in Bible college a million years ago called Christian Ministry. And it basically was a bunch of older professors that had been around the block a long, long time. And they were giving simple, practical advice to a bunch of young guys about how to be preachers. And some of our courses that we had in school were detailed. I mean, they were deep, they were hard. History of Israel, Hebrew, Greek language, prophetic literature in the Old Testament. There were some classes that were really, really hard, but not this one. I mean, basically you just sat and you just listened to these seasoned veterans just pour into us young guys little hints that'll come in handy. I don't even think we got a grade in that class. You just listen to guys on how to do this. That's where I learned before you get up and preach, make sure your socks are up and your zipper's up in the locked position. Honest truth, honest truth. I've been doing that every week for 45 years now. I learned it in that class. Now, on that particular class, Dr. Webb told us one day, make ministry fun. I'll never forget when he said that. He said, help people learn how to laugh. He described that life has enough heartache, it has enough rough times, so insert joy whenever you can. And I still remember him teaching that. He taught us how to use humor in our sermons, because if you get people to laugh, they will listen to the truth better if you can do that. I have found that to be true in my life. Somebody told me one time, Dave, you used too many jokes today. I said, well, if you know what I cut out, you've been proud of me, okay? So I have found that to be very, very true. If preachers can make fun of themselves, y'all love to laugh at me at my expense. You are more open to the truth. Now, you old-timers here, you'll remember one of those stories that went around the rounds for a long time about the guy who called the church office to talk to the preacher. And if you're an old timer, you remember that story. We'll just kind of make it act like it happened here. The phone rings and Miss Pat, who is our sweet, loving, gentle office manager, answers the phone. Eastside Christian Church, can I help you? And he said, can I speak to the head hog at the trough? She said, excuse me, pardon me. He said, the head hog at the trough, is he there? She said, who are you talking about, sir? He said, the preacher, some guy named Hastings. Well, that went through Miss Pat because she loves me, and she let that old boy have it. She said, I'm sorry, sir, but we refer to him in more respectful terms around here. You could ask for Mr. Hastings, lead pastor, reverend, but not the head hog at the trough. He said, I'm sorry, ma'am, I meant no harm of that. I'm a hog farmer up in Henryville. And we had a great year last year. Me and the missus have been talking about it, and we'd like to donate $100,000 to your church. There was a pause, and Miss Pat said, hang on. I think I hear the fat pig coming down the hall right now. Now, you like that at my expense, right? I remember the old story about the preacher visiting one of his senior saints. So we're going to make that about our beloved John Talbot here. Been a shepherding pastor here since the Apostle Paul retired. And so John been here forever. And so John was visiting Mrs. Johnson, and they were just having a sweet little visit. And on the table, right there in her living room, was a bowl of peanuts. And Miss Johnson was talking, and he grabbed a peanut. She kept talking. He grabbed another peanut. She just kept talking. He just kept eating peanuts. Finally looked over and realized, I ate the entire bowl. Miss Johnson, I'm so sorry. I ate every peanut in that bowl. She said, don't worry about that, preacher. Last week, my dentures broke. All I could do was suck the chocolate off of them anyway. Now, if you don't know, watch this, that what Dr. Webb told us, to have fun and laugh and enjoy yourselves, what you might not know is that advice he gave us, he found it in the Bible. And I want to show you that today. In January, during this month at Eastside, we've been working through this series that we've called Mama Didn't Raise No Dummy. And what we mean by that series is we're doing kind of a bird's eye look at the book of Proverbs. And the goal of it is just to kind of encourage us all to kind of wet our whistle with this interesting book in the Old Testament and develop a love for the book of Proverbs. That's what we're doing. And so during this month, we've just kind of pulled out some of the Proverbs just as examples of some things that God gives us great wisdom in. They're written in the mindset of what a parent would tell a child about how to have a great life. You want to have a great life? Then here's some things to do. You want to have a great life? Then don't be doing those things. And so the whole book of Proverbs is with that light. That's why we called it Mama Didn't Raise No Dummy. Now, the first couple weeks, we've talked about things that were pretty heavy. They're pretty tough. We talked about these couple of things. On week one, watch your mouth. Be very careful about how you speak. And I've been hearing some good things now this week about that. Y'all didn't do too well that first week, but we've gotten better with that. And then choose your friends carefully last week. Man, I've been really hearing some stories about that. Some people who are getting intentional about good, strong Christian relationships. I heard that this week. I've heard some people that, man, I got to get some turkeys out of my life, okay? You can't fly with the eagles if you're hanging around the turkeys, can you? And so all those things have been good, but those were tough. Those are hard principles to apply in your life. Now, today what we're going to do is we're going to soften it a bit. Because we're going to dive into this idea today about this concept of keeping your chin up. Because life's going to knock your chin down once in a while. And when life kind of knocks your chin down, you got to know how to get it back up. And the Bible gives us some instruction on how that can happen. So I want you to look at this very familiar passage from Proverbs. Anybody's ever read the book? This is one of their favorite passages. Chapter 17, verse 22. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Now, let's kind of slice into that a little bit. Let's spend a little bit of time and kind of get down under the covers, under the weeds of that. And I want you to see that there's kind of a good news, bad news thing going on in this verse. And the bad news is that we are more than likely going to have moments in our life where our spirit is crushed. There's going to be things that happen to us in our life that cause our chin to drop. And sometimes those are minor things, and sometimes they're major things, and most of the time they're kind of right in the middle of that. Those of you who know me well are aware of what I think about winter weather. Can I get an amen in the house of God? Okay, last week, after my fourth shoveling of the driveway, I'll tell you what, I worry about you people who like winter weather. I'm just going to tell you, I think you're possessed by the devil. I really do. I really believe that with all honesty. And so I've done this 4 times in my driveway, and I realized that I got another job. I got a flat roof on my garage, and I'm just looking at it, caving in on my cars. And so I climb up on that silly thing. And I am shoveling and carrying it to the side. And I'm at the point where every time I pick up more snow, my chin falls more. And I finally get that job done, and I walk into the house, and I'm about as low could be. And I'm thinking, all you people like winter, and I'm just had it with you. I'm glad you're not in front of me. And I'm just as down as I can get. And I picked up my phone, and I sent a text to a preacher friend of mine in Southern California. See how he's doing. And he tells me 12 churches in their region, 12 churches in the region have burnt all the way to the ground. The church buildings are completely gone. All the pastors of all those churches and hundreds of people who go to those churches have all lost their homes. And I'm sitting on my couch realizing that that's what it's like in a room like this. That when we come together at Eastside, some people are here and you're dragging chins because it snowed in your life. And other people are dragging chins because they've lost everything they have. And most people are somewhere between those two extremes. We get a crushed spirit. And that's what life is. If you've never seen this verse, look at 1 Peter 4:12. It says, dear friends, do not be surprised at the painful trial you're suffering as though something strange were happening to you. I love the word strange. I think they did a great job interpreting that word because it means stranger. It means there's somebody there who ain't supposed to be here, man. Somebody hanging out with me who's not welcome here. And what that verse reminds us is that you will and I will have times in our life where something will come into our life that is not welcome. We didn't want that. We never saw it coming. It was not a part of my life. I don't want it to be a part of my life. And friends, I want you to understand that what he says is that's not something you ought to be surprised about because that's something that is normal. It is the norm to have your chin knocked down. And sometimes it'll be a gentle tap when you're shoveling snow, and sometimes it'll be a knockout punch when the doctor brings up the C word. That's the negative part of this great verse in Proverbs. But then it's overshadowed with the good news. When your chin gets knocked down, when your spirit is crushed, listen to this, we've got some medicine for that, gang. There's a fix for it. There is a remedy for that. It is actually, as the proverb author wrote, a medicine that you take. I love the concept of a great metaphor that this author is using. You feel so sick, you go to the doctor, you say, this is what's going on. The doctor gives you a prescription that's going to get your chin back up. That's what this verse is saying. That when life does its thing to you and your spirit is crushed. And there's people in this room right now who are saying, bro, you got a camera at my house? Because I just feel that's where I'm at right now. Then the Proverbs author says, there's a remedy for it. There's a medicine for it. And here it is, a cheerful heart. Learn to build a cheerful heart in your life. Make sure you see that picture, that in the midst of being crushed, there is the potential to be cheerful. Did you see that? While I'm crushed, I can be cheerful. I found an awesome, really quick video that describes that. Check this out real quick.
What is it? What is it? What? What? Oh.
I mean, I want to be that guy, don't you? Huh? I want to be that little guy. That my chin has been knocked down, I'm crushed, but somehow I've learned to build a cheerful heart in the midst of that. That's the proverb of chapter 17, verse 22. Now, here's kind of the unfortunate part of the proverb is the author does not tell us how to do that. This is one of those proverbs where it just makes a matter-of-fact statement. That when your chin gets knocked down, when your spirit is crushed, build a cheerful heart. It'll take care of it. And that's all it says. It doesn't say, okay, here's how you do it. But the good news is that Jesus did it all the time. And when you look at the life of Jesus, you find out that besides dying on the cross for our sins that we just talked about a few minutes ago, besides that, he came on this earth to teach us how to live the best life we can have. And when you look at the life of Jesus, you find out that there were times when circumstances caused his chin to drop. And when that happened, he knew how to build a cheerful heart in light of that. And so this is what I want you to kind of walk away from in this service, is I want to show you some times that he did that. And if you're in the room right now and you've kind of, you've had the chin drop a little bit, you've had the spirit crushed in your life for one reason or another, I want you to see how Jesus responded to those things. And you might find out that there's something that he did that you say, man, I can do that. I can do that. And you will find a cheerful heart in the midst of a crushed spirit. So with that, just let me show you a few things that Jesus did. Jesus knew how to do this. In the midst of that, he learned to look to others. He looked at others. And this makes all the sense in the world. When the stranger has knocked on your door that you don't want there, and it's caused you anguish, it's so easy to be internal with that and think of your own plight. What Jesus did was he turned it around. That in the midst of that, he looked at the plight of other people instead. Now, that was such a big deal that when the Apostle Paul was addressing it years later to a church, he brought up Jesus' example here. He brought that up. It's written to the church in Philippi, and if you know much about the Philippian letter in the New Testament, it's all about joy, how to be happy, how to have a cheerful heart. And Paul knew that would not always be easy. For me to say, I want you to laugh, I want you to be happy, I want you to be cheerful. Some of you right now are saying, man, I can't do that right now. And Paul knew that wouldn't happen all the time. And so he said, hey, try this. In chapter 2, verse 4, he said this. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also the interest of others. What he was saying was turn it around now and start looking at other people's plight instead of just your own. Now, it's interesting what Paul does. I want you to see that that's the fourth verse. And in the next verse, he says this. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. And what he was doing was, let me tell you how Jesus did that. And the rest of the second chapter describes what Jesus went through when he left heaven to come to earth. That heaven is beautiful. Heaven was perfect. Everything heaven was, it was everything life could ever be. And then Jesus hears the plan to leave all of that and come to earth where nothing's perfect, where problems are constant, and they're going to kill him. If any of you and I heard that, our chins would drop as far as it go. You mean I've got to leave that to come to this? Are you kidding me? And Jesus didn't have a woe is me attitude, but he looked away from his own sacrifice, his own plight, and he looked to the needs of humans that would forever be lost without his help. And so he didn't resent come to the earth. He came with a passion. He came with a joy. He came with a cheerful heart. And so Paul uses that example. When something is knocking your chin down, look at somebody else, the situation they're going in, and watch that make you feel much better about your own. Learn to look to others. When I served a church in Illinois when I was a young man, and we had a county hospital in our church, in our city. We were a real little town, about 5,000 people. We kind of had our own hospital we were proud of. And we kind of went through America, a time where those hospitals struggled and it closed. And so a religious organization came in and they bought that property and they turned it into a facility that took care of severely handicapped children. Mentally and physically handicapped children severely. I ran into the director of the hospital one time, and I remember his name was Jerry. Can't remember his last name. And I'm talking to Jerry about what they're doing out there. And he said, why don't you come and see? And I said, man, I'd love to do that. And so he had me over, and I walked into the facility, and we were going up into the ward where they had all the kids. And before we went in there, he goes, you got to promise me you're going to see some people up there that you can't ever tell anybody you saw them. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. But we go up there and we're walking through the ward where they have all these children, and I was unable to speak because when you're in shock, you can't speak. I'd never seen anything like this. I didn't know there were kids like this. Little babies who were either blind or deaf or missing limbs. Children who couldn't even feed themselves, had no ability even to exist. We play with that word vegetable too flippantly, and most of them were vegetables. And there were adults from the community one guy might be over here feeding one of the children. There might be a lady over here who has one in her lap. There might be someone over here on the floor rubbing a leg and massaging a back. And Jerry told me these are leaders in our community. They don't do this for any kind of limelight at all, but they give up time from their life, maybe their lunch hour or somewhere, and they come up here and they help us take care of the kids because there's more than we can take care of. I got to know some of those adults through the years, and as I would go up and pray with families, and I was talking to this one guy who went up there who was a lawyer in that town, and we were talking about his time up there, and I asked him this question. I said, when do you go up there? Do you go like early in the morning? Do you go at lunchtime? When do you go help? And he said, no, I don't go any of those times. I said, when do you go? He said, whenever I get really feeling bad that my life is hard, that's when I go. Because when I walk out, I realize that my situation isn't too bad. See, Jesus did that. And so if you're in this room right now and you're thinking, man, I've just kind of had the stranger knock on my door, and I don't want it, man, I didn't want it, and I'm not sure how to deal with this. And Jesus says, hey, try to turn your focus on other people's plight and watch cheerfulness restore. Beautiful, beautiful strategy of our Savior. Let me show you something else he did real quick. He was really good at this. He learned to lighten the mood, okay? Looking to others, I mean, that's kind of heavy, okay? That's hard to do. Lightening the mood is just so much softer. It is also super practical. I saw a picture of this the other day on social media. Susan and I are friends with a family who've been going through just some tough stuff with kind of the patriarch of the family, the dad, the husband, and he'd been battling cancer about 7 or 8 years, and he passed away a week or so ago at 51 years old. And so when they knew that time was coming, they had him at the house, and all the family and kids and everybody kind of convened on the house. And some of you have been in that setting, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting and paying vigil, and minutes turn to hours, and hours turn to days. And some of y'all been there, and that's where this family was. And so somebody in the family had taken a picture of some of the family members. They were sitting around the kitchen table, and they were playing a card game. And while you were looking at the picture, there were several of them that were laughing hysterically. And if you looked at that picture and you knew what was happening in the bedroom at the same time, some people would look at that and think, how can you do that? How can you have fun and laugh and enjoy when that over there is going on? How does that happen? How can you do that in such a heavy moment? And the answer is, because if you don't, it'll drive you insane. And God put a release valve in us to lighten the mood in appropriate moments. And so you might be in a setting in your life right now where you wonder, how in the world can I be cheerful? Well, just kind of let that release valve happen and see how God uses that to lift your spirit. Again, Jesus did this in a beautiful way. In fact, one of my favorite stories about Jesus completely is in Luke chapter 14. And what happens in that story is his enemies, one of his arch enemies, had invited him to his home for dinner. Would you go? Would you do that? If the person who doesn't like you the most called you tonight, said, hey man, come over to my house for dinner tomorrow, would you go? I don't know if I'd go. Jesus said, I'll be there. And so Luke 14, he shows up. He's having dinner at his arch enemy's home, and the air is as thick as it can be. Read Luke 14. It's almost fascinating. Jesus goes in there, and it says nobody's talking. And so everybody's kind of... And so Jesus tries to get him talking. Now, I'm that kind of a guy. When I walk into a setting like that, I'm not going to be the fly on the wall. I'm going to say something silly or stupid or something to try to loosen. And so Jesus asked some guys some questions because nobody's talking and it's really super awkward. And he'd ask the question, and listen to this, nobody even answered him. Look at this passage right here from Luke 14. But they remained silent. Hey, how was your day? Nobody said anything. And so he just keeps asking questions, penetrating questions. Look at verse 6 a little bit later. And they had nothing to say. Don't ask me. Don't ask me. Don't ask me. And so what Jesus does in a tense moment, when everybody's got their chin down, when everybody goes, I don't know what to do right now, what do I do? He told a story to make them laugh. That's exactly what he did. He told this story. He said, hey, I want to tell you about this story about these three guys I heard about. And they were invited to come to this dinner. And they all said no. They weren't going to go because they all had excuses. And he's telling this story. And he said, now the first guy said, hey, I'm not coming. I won't be there. I can't make it because, see, I bought this land and this property, this little area here. And I can't come to dinner because I'm going to go check out the property and see what it looks like. And some of the guests started chuckling. What kind of knucklehead buys land before he sees it? Who does that? And it's not in the text. It's not there. It's not in Luke 14. You won't find it. So I've written it in my margins. I can see one of them saying, probably a Kentucky fan, probably something like that. That's who did that. And so Jesus said, and there was this other guy, and he was invited, come to the dinner. And Jesus said, he wouldn't come either. He said, I'm not coming. He goes, now I bought 5 oxen, and they're going to help plow the field. And so I got to go check them out and see if they're good. And they start chuckling a little bit. What knucklehead buys oxen without knowing if they can plow? Who does that? And one of the other guys in the corner says, probably a Louisville guy. Probably a Louisville guy did that. And then Jesus said there was a third guy, and man, he said, hey, come to the party, come to the dinner. And he said, I can't come. I just got married, and my wife won't let me. That's in the Bible. It's right there. And they all start cracking up, henpecked Indiana dude, okay? And so what Jesus does is he gets them all laughing. He gets them all kind of loose. And then once they are, then he talks to them about some serious stuff about discipleship. So I just want that to play with you for a second. Sometimes when your chin gets knocked down, watch for times when you can lighten the mood. Now, some people are better than others. Some of y'all ain't smiled in 14 years, okay? You're probably not going to be good at this. And sometimes it's appropriate, and sometimes it's not. But lifted chins can sometimes appear when the mood has been lightened. Pay attention to that. It's remarkable how that works. Hey, I'm going to give you one more. We're going to get out of here. And I probably, if I had to redo this, I'd just write the whole sermon about this. When his chin got down, when there were strangers in his life because he didn't want that stuff, when things got rough, Jesus knew how to long for heaven. And this is beautiful. It's a fascinating part of his life because he had a lot of moments when his chin got knocked down. He cried when his friend Lazarus died. He got choked up when he looked out over the city of Jerusalem and all these people were running away from God and it tore his heart out. And when he heard that they murdered his friend John the Baptist, he had to get away on his own. And it was disheartening to him when he healed the 10 lepers and one guy comes back and he says, where's the other 9? There was all kinds of times in which Jesus kind of had his wind taken out of his sail and his chin got knocked down. And nothing could compare that to the hours that were leading up to his own death. I mean, read that in the Bible, the night before he died and everything that was going on. And not only he knew that he was going to die, he knew how he was going to die. And all of his friends knew it too. There's probably not another time in his life where he was more despondent and more broken in spirit. And then he says this in the middle of it. Words that you've heard over and over. He simply looked at his friends who were broken in the moment, and he was broken in the moment, and he said this. He said, hey, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust in me. Because in my Father's house, there are many rooms. And if it weren't so like that, I would not be telling you this. And I'm going there. I'm going there. And I'm going to prepare a place for you there. And if I go there and prepare a place for you, I'm going to come back. I'm going to take you to be with me, that you can also be where I am. Anybody see what he was doing? He was looking forward to what God had in store for him instead of waddling in the moment. He longed for heaven. He looked past the moment. This is not the end of my journey. Something better is in the future for me. And because I know what is waiting on me in heaven, I can endure the trouble for today. And so when the stranger shows up and the chin drops and the spirit is crushed, it is so easy to forget that there's something waiting for us and to long for it. I wish I could bring out Mr. Don to the stage and let him close us out. Mr. Don is a real guy. He gets up every morning, drives himself to a local restaurant. He has breakfast by himself, and that's hard because the past 50 years, he would sit at his kitchen table and he'd eat breakfast that his wife had made him. And now his wife isn't there anymore, and so he sits alone and he eats food that a stranger has prepared for him. Mr. Don had a doctor's appointment recently and did a thorough checkup of his body and his mind. And his doctor came in, and same doctor he's had for several decades, and said, brother, you keep this up, my friend, you're going to live to be 100. And Mr. Don growled at him and said, you ever tell me that again, I'm going to fire you and I'm going to go find another doctor. And his surprised doctor said, what are you talking about? He said, I don't want to stay here forever. I want to go see my wife. I want to go see my Lord. I walked in a restaurant a while back, and Mr. Don was sitting there. I hadn't seen him for a number of years, and I sat down at the restaurant over where I live in Louisville, and I visited him for a bit. He told me the story that I just told you, and I reached out and I patted him on the arm, and I said, man, are you doing okay? And he said, I am, because this world is not my home. You want a merry heart? Okay. Then remember what has been prepared for you. The trouble of this moment will someday fade away in light of a wonderful life waiting for you. This might not get any better, but that is your home. And so Jesus learned to do those things. Whenever the stranger showed up at his door and knocked his chin down, he did all these things. Look at him real quick. He looked to others, he lightened the mood, he longed for heaven, and those worked for him. And I'm telling you, they will work for you. A number of years ago, my parents were aging at the point where it became obvious that they were going to need some help from their kids. And so I'm one of three, and so we all kind of talked about what we were going to do. And my brother and I decided to take turns traveling to their home. And we'd spend a weekend apiece each month, and we'd just help out whatever was needed. And on one of my months when I was driving to Illinois to spend my weekend, my heart became heavy, and my chin fell, and my spirit was crushed at the idea that my parents and their life and their chapter of what I called normal was starting to come to an end. And it was just breaking my heart while I drove there. And the closer I got to the home that I lived in my whole life, the hometown, and my despondency over my parents, I started reeling, thinking about what they must think about that. And if you've ever been in that setting, you know what that's like. We tend to think if we're the kids, okay, we got to take care of them, and that's so sad to see what's happening to them. But what do you think they think? And when you look through their perspective, they knew what was happening. They knew what it was like. They hated the fact that their kids would have to come and take care of them. And the more I started thinking about how it was affecting them, I tended to find that myself wasn't as negatively affected. Did you see that? I looked to others. I worked like a dog all weekend that year. I power washed the house. I manicured the lawn. I cleaned out the garage. I mean, I was absolutely worn out, saying, I got to go home or I'm going to die here with them. And I was just worn out. And at the end of the day, they sat me at the kitchen table. It was the cutest thing in the world. These two old people sitting down their son, and they thanked me for being there. And then my mom said, we want to do something for you because of what you've done. And bro, I thought the inheritance was going to start coming out. I mean, this is it. I've been wondering where it's at, how much. This is it. And my dad leaned over the table and he said, in all seriousness, have you ever been to Long John Silver's? And I started laughing. I said, I think maybe a couple times. He said, we want to take you there. And so we got in the car and I drove to Long John Silver's. It was Friday evening. I still remember because there was a line outside the restaurant. All the cheap Catholics were buying fake fish that night. And the place was packed with people. And so I dropped mom and dad off. I went and found a parking lot about a block away. I walked in. The line's still all the way back. I got right behind my dad. He turned around and looked at me and said, you can go ahead, bud. We're waiting on somebody. I said, Dad, you're waiting on me. Oh, I didn't recognize you. We got up to the cash register. Mom got down in her purse. She pulled out a coupon about as big as my thumb here. And she had this thing like this. And she apparently thought the coupon was only good one per family member. And so she reached over and she told the little girl, we got this coupon right here. We brought our friend with us. And he's going to have a number 6. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not their friend. And I'm not having a number 6. And I got what I wanted. And we just had a wonderful time. And then I dropped him off. I headed home, and I called my sister on the phone, and I told her the whole thing. And I think we cried a little bit about the reality of it. And then we started laughing so hard I had to pull over. I was crying because I was laughing. And then we started talking about the reality that every day they are closer to heaven. And I just saw my spirit lift. Because I looked at them, I laughed in the middle of it, and I longed for heaven. And although my spirit was crushed, my heart was cheerful. Father, I thank you that your word is just so real. You know what our life is like. You understand that, God, and you give us pictures on how to navigate all of that. And so would you help us, all of us, some who are enduring minor stuff and some are doing major stuff, and most of us right in the middle somewhere. Will you help us? Will you help us to keep our chin up by the power of your love? Amen.